Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you a first look at the fabulous new Fujinon. This is the XF 200mm f2 OIS WR lens. And so this is the first super telephoto lens for the Fuji X mount for mirrorless bodies like this new XT3 that I've got mounted on there. In this case, as you can see, it is not mounting the lens on the camera. It is mounting the camera on the lens. But such is the nature of this new Extreme line. As you can see, this is a beautiful lens. We're going to jump in and we're going to look at it closely hands-on today. Now, this of course is the first super telephoto for Fuji's X mount system. And so this is pushing into a whole new territory for them in terms of price and of course in terms of a market. One of the hits that they've been dealing with is that there simply weren't enough of, kind of serious telephoto lenses for the system. And so this, of course, is a means of rectifying that. As you can see, it has a beautiful pearlescent type finish that I think is actually a lot more attractive than what some of the Canon great whites are. This is a really, really eye-catching lens, and for good or for evil, when I've been out in public with this lens, wherever I've been, I've shot an event with it, and I was just out in public shooting, just trying to get review pieces, and I have people come up to me wanting to have a conversation about it, and of course, you can tell the people that don't know much about cameras or lenses because they'll come up and see the lens mounted to the camera and say, "What kind of camera is that?" And of course, what they're talking about is the lens. I've had people want to take pictures of it or take pictures of me with the lens. So it is an eye catcher here with that pearl finish and then this, bright green chrome accent point here up on the lens hood. Now physically, as you can see, it is a large lens, and in fact, kind of surprisingly, considering that this is for a mirrorless APS-C system, the lens itself is actually about the same physical dimensions as what the lenses for either Canon or Nikon that are 200mm f2 lenses are. We'll get into that a bit more in a second. Let's take a look at the lens hood before we set this aside. As you can see, it uses what's pretty traditional for big lens hoods like this. It has got a locking mechanism on the side that will clamp it into place, and it does a good job of staying secure. Another thing two things let's point out. Of course, a flocked interior, you're probably pretty accustomed to that. It does have a door here. If you're using a polarizer filter, you have the ability, or whatever filter, you have the ability to access it, but really it's a polarizer that you might want to rotate through that without having to reach in the very deep top to try to rotate a filter. And so that certainly is a plus there. The other thing I want to point out is it has a rubberized rim here at the front, which is very, very practical because a lot of people are going to do something like this with that mounted on there. They're going to set the lens down with that lens hood facing down, and that of course provides a place for that to go. So, a lot of pluses there. I mentioned the physical dimensions of this lens. It is a large lens. It is 4.8 inches in diameter, or 122 millimeters in diameter. So unlike the Canon utilizes a drop-in filter system for their 200mm f2, so it's a rear drop-in filter. In this case, we've actually got a 105mm front filter threading, and so you're going to be using large filters, but you can use traditional filters. And of course, it does have a very large, but really nicely made pinch cap that fits in there securely. And so yes, a big diameter here, particularly towards the front. The lens length is a little over 8 inches long, 8.07 inches, which is 205 millimeters in length. And the weight itself, and by the way, this is within just a few millimeters in each dimension of Canon's own 200mm f2. The weight itself also is similar. It's right under 5 pounds, 4.98 pounds, 2,026 grams, and that compares to 5.54 pounds for the Canon, so basically a half pound heavier, or 2,520 grams. And so it's it's a pretty hefty lens, but I think that in part it's because they have designed this to achieve a pretty amazing optical performance, which we will get to more in a future episode. So continuing on in our tour of the lens itself here, you'll note that there are 4 different buttons at the 4 points of the compass on here. You have a couple of options on what you can do with those. They can be used to program in certain focus positions. And so if you're shooting sports or an event where you have a kind of a preset position you need to come back to, you could program those in and instantly go to those focus points when desired. There's a set button down here that allows you to do some programming. You also have an option, however, to program these for other things. And so, we've got an AF lock that you can do with that. You can also, just change actual AF modes by using that. And so there's some nice functionality there. You've got a nice wide focus ring here. Of course, this is a lens that is designed for a mirrorless system, and so as a result, it has no mechanical hard stops, but focus input is routed through the camera body and the focus motor to achieve actual focus changes. But the focus ring itself feels very nice. I really like Fuji's approach to aperture. They give you the ability to have a hybrid approach, which I think helps with future-proofing somewhat. And so you can either use a manual aperture ring here, which you can select 1/3 stops for more precision there. And so, it's not just jumping in between, but you have, different aperture values in between. So from f2 to f22, you can also put it into automatic mode and control it from the camera if you so desire. Now, you do have a focus limiter here, and so either the full range or from 5 meters to infinity if you're, for example, doing sports or wildlife and don't want to, venture into the closer focus area. The lens itself can actually focus down to 5.91 feet, which is 1.8 meters. And there it has a, fairly pedestrian 0.12 times magnification. And the optical stabilizer, image stabilization system here, it is an automatic system, so it's just an on and off button here, but it's an intelligent OIS, and so it detects what you're doing. So if you're panning, for example, it will turn off the appropriate axis to give you smooth panning shots, and so you don't have to think much about it when it comes to that. I will note, and I'll cover this more in my later review, the optical stabilizer is incredibly good in this lens. I mean, I think it's probably the best that I've ever seen. It is silent. It completely holds the viewfinder stable. It also does a brilliant job of stabilizing the end result. And I've gotten some really ridiculously low shutter speeds considering the focal length that's at play here. Really, really impressed with that. More on that in the future. Your tripod collar here, it can be loosened and it can be rotated in any position, of course, but it does have detents at the 4 points of the compass that will allow you to make sure that you can line up in those different modes. Another thing I want to highlight that I always like when it comes to tripod foot is you'll see this is Arca Swiss compatible. What that means, you can go right onto your tripod and crank it down without having to worry about a quick release plate. Definitely a bonus there. Looking here at the rear of the lens mount looks tiny compared to the size of the lens, but you'll notice that there is a gasket here. And so this is a fully weather sealed lens, and it has a lot of robust sealing within. It is definitely a sport type mode. Now, another thing that I do want to highlight about this is that it comes as a kit with this little teleconverter, and it seems really, really small compared to the lens itself, but this little teleconverter here. Now, of course, Fuji has already independently sold another teleconverter, but this one is designed in particular for this lens. It's compatible, it's designed for an f2 telephoto lens, which none of the previous ones have been. And so it's optimized to give you, serious performance with this particular lens. Now, it is backwards compatible with other lenses that do use, that can take a 1.4 1.4 times teleconverter. And so you can use it with other lenses. However, you cannot independently buy this teleconverter. It comes only as a kit with this lens, and it's the biggest reason for that is that the older teleconverters, they're not going to give you the same degree of performance with this lens. And so there's a possibility that down the road, should Fuji release other super telephoto lenses that could benefit from the same kind of teleconverter, they might sell that independently. Right now it comes only as a kit with this lens. So as I mentioned, this is for an APS-C sensor, and so it actually has a comparative 35 millimeter or full frame equivalent focal length of 305 millimeters. If you attach the 1.4 times to it, that becomes the equivalent of 427 millimeters at a maximum aperture of f2.8. So the lens itself optically is 19 elements in 14 groups, and it has 9 rounded aperture blades. And so as you can see, this is a unique lens for Fuji. It's a beautifully constructed lens. It's also priced like most super telephoto lenses are. In the US market, this is a $6,000 lens, coming in kit, of course, with the teleconverter. And one other thing I will highlight is that it comes with a really, really beautiful case here, quite a huge case, but nicely padded, and it has both a handle, it has a carrying strap, it has a place along the top for you to put your business card, and so you can make sure to identify it as yours. One thing I also like is it's got an insert that goes into the top where you can actually tuck that teleconverter, so you always have it along. But you can also take this out, and one thing I do like about this is that you can actually, it fits in here to put the lens with the camera attached into this, and I shot an event this last weekend where I carried it like that, and so I had a really secure way of making sure that everything was protected and kind of hidden away. And so that's certainly one final plus when it comes to that. And so as you can see, this is a beautifully designed, beautifully functional, and really fantastic lens. And stay tuned for my next episode where I will break down the image quality for you, which, by the way, it is fantastic. But I'll take a look at that as well as image quality with the teleconverter attached. But a lot of stuff to look forward to when it comes to this if you are in the market for a lens like this one. In the meantime, if you want to see some photos from the lens, here are a couple of them. But if you look in the description down below, I've got linkage there to my image gallery that I'm contributing to throughout the course of my review cycle here. And so anyway, I'm looking forward to all of that. So stay tuned regularly for that. And of course, you can also find some buying links there if you'd like to purchase one for yourself. You can follow me on social media, become a patron, sign up for my newsletter. And if you haven't already clicked that subscribe button right here on YouTube, please do so. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.